Hey, good. Can you hear me at the back? I feel like I'm in Covent Garden. You know when they try and attract a crowd and just gather people around with a rope and then sort of like get the kids in clapping and cheering for no reason whatsoever. So, can you go with the red strap? Can you hear me? Good, right, you can hear me, perfect. So welcome, we're just discussing how to sit on these seats, so apologies if we look slightly awkward, they're kind of strangely deep as seats. So welcome to this session. Got a brilliant panel today, excluding me. So I'm Ben Chambers, I ex-Tesco, ex-GSK, ex-Grant Thornton, and now I run a community of learning professionals. So I'm looking out across the sea of faces, and there's a bunch of you in it. So if you want to sort of connect with your community and tribe, then come and have a chat with me, and I'll get you joined up for that. So, but more importantly, our panel today, we've got Abbie Anand, who is Head of Leadership Development over at Deloitte. We've got Gregor Thain, who is currently independent, but is ex-Spirax, I forget which way around it is. Spirax. BAE, Coca-Cola, IHG, GSK, to name but a few. And we've got Laura Ahura, who's VP Talent Development at Brown Brothers, Harriman, and ex-Randstad as well. So brilliant panel. So trying to make this as practical as possible, whilst also recognising we've got about half an hour, and I want to make sure you get stuff out of it. So we're going to do about 20 minutes worth of content, and then open up the floor for sort of 10 minutes worth of questions. So if you're thinking, Ben, your questions are crap, there's much better things you could have asked, get ready to wave at the chat with the orange T-shirt on, who's vanished. He's gone, who will give you a microphone and let you ask your questions. So there we go. That's the plan for today. So I'm torn actually, because I've been a CLO in a role, I've headed up leadership development at Tesco and done various sort of chunky roles. And what was reflecting on the topic here, which is around high-performing teams and learning functions in a time of disruption. So I'm torn because at the moment it looks, and I suspect this is probably the emotions you're experiencing, it looks really exciting at the moment. There's a lot of change going on. There's a lot to get your teeth into. Feels like a moment in time where you can do some really good work. And the reason I'm torn is because also it looks like bloody hard work and there's a lot of uncertainty out there as well. So I'm kind of torn between those two emotions myself personally. So I'm curious to sort of see how you folks have found this. So first question for you, I think what we should probably start with is what does a high-performing learning function look like? And then kind of how has that changed over time? So Gregor, I'm going to start with you on that, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Gregor. So what does a high-performing learning function look like? And I guess what some of the changes we've seen over the last few years heading in that direction. For me, it's a lot to do with integration and how integrated L&D is in the business. Not just waiting for a leader to come up with some topic that they want an L&D program for, but really at the front end in the business, spotting what the needs are, where the performance gaps are, out day to day in the meetings that you might not normally be in with business leaders, out on the front line seeing the operations, and really being good at spotting where the opportunities are so it can be brought back into the business. And integration, I think, at the back end as well. Often as learning leaders we think the answer to everything is probably a learning program, when actually quite often it's probably not. An example of that was a previous company where we were asked, can we have a program about innovation? We want everyone to be more innovative. And so we span up a program, we're very proud of it, but we quickly realized that it wasn't making much difference. And we got into it a bit more, so we were far more in the business working out what is actually going on, and realized that the thing that was stopping innovation was more about the finance process. Everyone had to have their budget nailed down for 5 years with no slack, and so there was no room to be innovative, there was no spare money to try anything. And so by being more integrated in the business, understanding both the front end and the back end about how the solution will really fit, I think for me is the direction we've been going on, but also what we'll hopefully do further and further into the future.
So when I think about a high-performing learning function, I'm often thinking about how we as individuals in learning roles need to be ambassadors for what the future and the world of work looks like. So when Ben shared this question with us a few days ago, kind of two human skills came up to mind. One, I think as learning professionals, we need to demonstrate and show that we're being curious. So everything that we're doing, like how are we learning around that? What are we demonstrating that we've got an appetite for? What are we talking to our business about? And then the other really important skill that I think we need to make sure we're demonstrating and role modeling is this skill of critical thinking. So how can we analyse, how can we interpret, how can we explore the information that's available to us, particularly in a world where we know we have so much content. It's about then what do we do with that? How do we take that forward?
Yeah, thank you. Good answers. And just my two penneth as well, and apologies to those who heard me say this before. I think actually we just need to be careful as learning professionals not to get too hung up on learning as the thing that we deliver. Learning is a means to an end, and actually we're delivering performance and productivity. So if you kind of walk into sort of your SLT and your chief exec and say, we're the learning function, actually they don't really care about the learning, they care about the output the learning creates. So to kind of get the ear of your leadership teams, you need to make sure you're kind of focusing on the output rather than the content and the programs and all that sort of stuff. So that's my two penneth. We've managed to get 5 minutes in so far without mentioning AI, so I'm going to do it now, so apologies. So the question we've got is around AI changing your approach. So one of the things I've learned in the community is that if I looked at last year, 2025, there was a lot of sort of people uncertain about what it's going to bring in and what can we do with it. What I'm now noticing towards the end of last year and this year is actually people are kind of figuring this out. They're starting to kind of figure out what can we do with this tool and these tools that we've got. So got a question around sort of AI and the practical implementation of AI. What are you doing in your organisation? So Abbie.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, we're doing lots of great stuff actually around AI, and I think one thing I would say is AI has definitely allowed us in learning to move much quicker. I think we've gone now from having very static, stale content that's kind of been around for a long time, and it's allowed us to continuously improve our content and be quite agile with it. The biggest thing we've done within Deloitte is we've started to look at how we can embed some of those practices within programs or within everyday things that we do. So one example is around the coaching element. And I think there's a really fine balance when it comes to coaching, because I think we are very lucky to have the skills of AI to be able to help us with some of the practical elements of that. So we have, lots of senior leaders that need a really safe space to be able to practice. They might not feel comfortable putting their hands up and saying, actually, I don't know everything there needs to be about coaching, and they might be a bit embarrassed about that. So what we wanted to do is create a safe space for leaders to be able to practice having a difficult conversation, having a coaching conversation before they actually have to go in and have that discussion. And we found that is something that is really beneficial to our leaders. One thing, though, we do need to mitigate with that is we don't want to replace fully the human coaching element. So just because AI is there, it doesn't mean then that we drop the human element. It's really, really, really important that we keep that human in the loop piece, because as great as AI is, and it does allow us to do some fantastic things, it doesn't quite yet have the empathy or the business nuance that we need. So we are practicing playing with it a lot. We're doing things around doing personal learning pathways. We're using different levels and different skills so people can really find the learning that they need quickly. So yeah, we're playing with AI quite a lot, and it's a fun time, and I think the main thing is not to be scared of it.
I have a question for you that I haven't asked you previously, which was, so Deloitte has got 18-year-olds through to 68-year-olds and beyond. Are you noticing a different level of adoption and enthusiasm for it? I was just thinking about my children who are using AI agents in Snapchat all the time.
Yeah, I think one of the things we tend to focus is on the leaders first. So we want the leaders to trickle down everything to the more junior and the people that are new into Deloitte. Actually, it works both ways, and it has to work throughout and permeate through the whole organisation. So I think there's still some work to be done, especially at the very top end. And I think we need those strong sponsorship advocates in the business to be able to trickle that message down for it to work.
Yeah, I think that's a real challenge. And we actually were talking about this earlier, that I think part of the starting point is just actually doing it. So ways in your organisation you can set up sessions where you're saying to someone, okay, what's the problem you've got at the moment within your team? Right, let's do that now, have a go, and then add that layer of sense making onto it. I think those sessions and learning functions leading those sessions work really well. Similar to Abbie at BBH at the moment, we are really excited by technology that supports someone when they're also working from home with perhaps some of the management skills that maybe because they're not in the office, they can't say, oh, hey, I've got a difficult conversation, like how would you approach this? Can you help me? So using that tech to support them and coach them through it, I think is great. For me, that means we can take that time back into the classroom doing much more exciting transformational leadership work rather than, okay, how do we have a difficult conversation? How do we manage performance? So if you can use tech to do that, then you can do more experiential and transformative stuff within the classroom. And then the other thing that I think tech is really great for at the moment is all that information, but it's then us layering as a learning function that sense making. So we're doing quite a lot of work about using that tech as an enabler, but not making sure it's not a detractor. So it's not like, oh, here's the answer, right, let's go and do it. Actually, how do you then work and collaborate with your peers to make sense of that? So that's how I see that learning functions bridge that challenge.
If I could just add to that as well, I think an interesting question to think about with AI is how can AI reduce the need for learning so that you can do less learning? At Spirax, we have one of our key roles is sales engineers, real expertise role out in customer sites, coming up with technical solutions, but it takes 3 years from hiring one to them being out in the business. And so using AI to create a performance support portal with a lot of knowledge they would normally have to learn, a lot of background they'd have to absorb before being confident. So they have it in their hands, taking it from 3 years down to 2, and hopefully beyond. So just reducing that time to effectiveness and taking away the need for learning as well.
Thanks. So you've done that. Gregor's done that brilliant politician thing as well, where I'm not going to answer your question, but if you ask me this question, here's what I would give you, which is superb. So well done for that as well. Next question for you is around translation to application. So I've got a session coming up in June where we're looking at sort of what's the human intervention, what's the human side of this, what's the human's role in all this, and we're talking a lot about sort of culture and change and OD and leadership development. So I'm keen to sort of see from your perspective, start with you, Laura, in terms of what's your perspective? What are you doing to sort of make sure the kind of the human skills and the elements that are required, particularly in relation to AI, are still being supported and developed and seen as critical?
So I think the biggest focus as a learning team is to kind of say, so what? So this is the information we've got, but so what can we do about it? How can we support leaders in translating that? We were speaking a bit about strategy execution. I think at the moment, a lot of companies have got their strategies for the year. They've set those out. We've had them in the town halls, the conferences. And then some of the further work we're trying to do is help leaders in particular say, okay, so how can we translate that? What does that look like for you? And for me, going back to some of the kind of simple roundtable sessions and discussion sessions where you've got leaders in a room working with their peers saying, so what does this look like? What is this going to look like in my business area? How am I going to make sure it lands in the right way? How am I going to make sure it has the impact that I'm looking to achieve so that people can feel connected? And I guess that's just my overall view with tech generally. We have such a crucial role as a learning function in helping bridge that gap so it means something to people. So anything that we can do as a team to support that really aligns to the business's overall goals and strategy.
I think one of the things we were saying earlier as well is that if you're doing something or you've been asked to create something in terms of learning and there's a need for something, always think about how is this feeding into that top line? How is this feeding into the strategy? Is this priority right now? And one of the things that I think is really helpful is if you can co-design, co-invest, co-deliver with other teams. I think it really helps to then move the needle and get that buy-in as to what it is that you're trying to deliver. So I think getting that stakeholder buy-in is really important in demonstrating the value that learning can bring as well.
Thank you, great answers. Right, we've got some time for Q&A. I can't see Liam. Where's Liam hiding? Right, he's gone off. Okay, I'm going to have to try and hand the mic out now. So, do me a favour, if you want to ask a question to the panel, wave your hand in the air. I'll come and give you the mic. And when you ask the question, give us a bit of background on you. So name, organisation, and so we just know the context as well, because that's really helpful when we're kind of answering questions. So this is the interactive bit. Anybody would like to ask a question? Oh.
Thank you. So I'm Maria, Culture and Experience Lead, People Experience Lead, recently left Deloitte. My question is, with all of this influx of change from a culture lens, how are the businesses making time for people to learn, giving them the space to take all these programs that you're developing, innovation, etc.? They're still delivering, they still need to meet their targets. You know, learning's important in part of culture, but are they practically making space for that? Just, I'm interested in that.
I'll attempt to answer that impossible question because it's such a usual challenge. I've often worked in manufacturing businesses as well, and people are often, or in the hospitality industry, they're not able to be off the job very easily without it costing money, and so it's constantly something. I think we need to be more creative about how you can learn through doing your job, how the job's designed, how the tools you have help you to learn as you go, how you support other people through demonstrations, mentoring, as you're doing your work, and we are not very creative. We kind of throw out more digital learning and say, do this in your own time, and I think that just stops working as people don't have the chance to do that. So that's a small part of the answer, is how we do better design of jobs to learn as you're actually doing the work.
Yeah, just two thoughts on that as well. So I completely agree with that. Having also lived through financial crisis and COVID and various other downturns, I think we also need to be like conscious as learning professionals that some of the stuff we do isn't actually necessary. So, and we're kind of like, we're quite wedded to some of this stuff. So being really kind of honest with ourselves in terms of actually, of the 100% stuff my function does, I could probably get away with only doing 50, 60%, and the wheels ain't going to fall off. So you've got to be quite clever as a senior learning person to make sure that you do the stuff that's really critical, but also be honest with ourselves. You could probably park some of that, delay it, or just cancel it. I did a thing on LinkedIn a month back where I looked at all the stuff the learning function does and tried to impact, like tried to figure out how's it going to be impacted by AI. So is it going to stay the same, is it going to change, or is it going to die, and what's going to be created? You can do the same with your learning function, actually figure out what do we actually really need to do. So challenge ourselves would be my response to that answer, that question.
Yeah, I just to add to that, I think language is really important. So I would look at your strategy and remove any of the words like bite size, because that is still a time factor. And if we go with the mentality that actually what someone is learning is sitting alongside them in their job, then maybe we're not talking about it being learning. You're just saying, well, this tool or this will show them how to do it quicker or faster or more effectively. So language, I think, is quite important, and definitely like no bite size learning.
I think it's a great question. It's a massive challenge for us to get leaders to allow, especially those more senior people in the business, to carve time out to dedicate to learning. And so, similar to your saying about the language of bite size, I completely agree with you. The problem we have is people have got so little time, they're so limited on time that they need to know quite quickly that they've only got 5 minutes, they've only got 10 minutes. How can they solve their issue and plug that gap they've got in their development within the shortest space of time possible? And that's why AI is great, right? But we do need to be better at making space for the deeper learning. So making space by creating things that are short, sharp and quick and just in time. But then we do still need to create that space. And I do think we need to be better at that.
I think you had your hand up, sir.
Thanks. Phil from Civil Service. In terms of learning functions, what's been your experience of the key differentiators between high-performing and mediocre performing or middling performance? What's been critical to achieve that?
Okay. I'll pull out one aspect, and I touched on it in an earlier answer. For me, the best learning teams have got a real closeness to the business, understand the operation, possibly have come up from that rather than from a learning background. I think For example, the role I had as head of learning for IHG, the hotel company, some of the learning team had worked in hotels, had worked up through hotels, really got what it meant to be in that role, and so everything they designed had that in mind. No one sitting at a desk, no one sitting with a laptop, so they could really put themselves in their shoes. And they spent a lot of time every week back in the operations. I know when I first started in that job as head of learning, I did 2 weeks working in the Crown Plaza, Heathrow, doing every job, laundry, breakfast, and whilst it was hard work, it kind of stood me in such good stead. And I think just that closeness into the audience that you're trying to help, that's one point.
I think another key way is how you measure it. So I think if you're measuring your learning by happy sheets or hours or attendance, then you're not aligning yourself to the strategy. If you're saying, because of this intervention that we did, we've seen a percentage increase in speed to productivity, or we've seen stronger retention or more mobility from this team in terms of leadership and future leaders, that is high performing. So yeah, I would remove happy sheets and all of that stuff, which actually also just takes a lot of time to present and work through.
I think from me, it's being agile. I think being quite quick to deliver something, and that means not being perfect straight away. I think we strive for perfection too much. We get so many people to give feedback, and we keep iterating until everyone's happy with the feedback. They're not always going to be happy. You've sometimes just got to get it, deliver it, and iterate as you go. So for me, I think being agile is what makes a high-performing team.
Yeah, and I'd say what it isn't. It's not budget. I've worked in big pharma and big banking, and we've had millions to spend. And I've worked in retail with 2% margins, and we've done some much better work in retail than we did in like big organisations. So I don't public sector money. I thought I'd just state that. Liam's got the other mic. So if you've got a question, wave at Liam, and he'll run to your direction.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Nicola. I'm an external leadership coach and consultant. What I've noticed, being oscillating from internal L&D roles and external, is that I don't think in L&D we're really solving the true problem. We're treating the symptoms. And I'm curious as to how could we lean on, or what could we do more differently with OD teams to solve some of these broader systemic challenges in organisations that are coming to us in L&D to deal with?
I completely recognise that. I think sometimes as learning professionals we see the answer as learning, and it's often so much wider than that there's no way the learning solution can really make the outcome happen. A good example I always think is coaching training. Everyone loves coaching training, everyone enjoys it, it goes down well, people think they need it, and often it doesn't result in any more coaching happening in a business because something else is going on. And often it's people see their role as giving advice. People are pressured to have all the answers, and therefore they're not going to coach because that's not what's expected. So there's a deeper OD or expectation happening. And so I just think the learning team have to be integrated and collaborate with the other HR functions and possibly wider, so they're looking systemically at what's the behaviour we're trying to change here, what's driving that behaviour, and it could be a whole range of things, and tackle them all, or as many as will make a difference. Whether it's job design, tools, expectations, money, learning will play a part, but it won't be enough on its own. So that's my thought.
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite if you can't beat them, join them, but like I don't see the distinction between learning and OD and change. I very quickly looked at, when I was in my career, the people who were getting access to the chief exec were the OD folks and the change folks. So the more skills you can get in your toolkit that give you those experiences, then the better position you're going to be. I do fear for the learning function a bit if we don't step into that space and start to figure out, okay, what does good organisational development look like, and what does good change management look like, and how do I facilitate leadership team conversations? Because if we don't do that, we're a support function. If you get involved in that, you're a strategic function. So I would upskill myself very quickly in those areas.
And also make sure you're collaborating with those people, because I think sometimes what happens is the request comes into training and it's like, oh yeah, we can do that. but actually that's just one stream within, you know, lots of great discussions that you can get involved in and you can support with. So, you know, to your point, I think it's about actually really working with those OD and change people as well as upskilling yourself so that you can make that change as a collective.
I think as well, just to add to that, is around getting sponsorship. If you've got a senior leader that agrees with that change and wants to see that change happen, I think if you've got the power of that sponsorship behind anything, it will go far and it will be successful.
I saw another hand, Liam. I think it was alongside you. Where's it?
Oh, I did. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was like, I thought someone kind of already answered it, but to continue on that conversation about getting an executive sponsor, I don't know if you can share any tips and advice about how to develop that relationship and sort of find the right executive sponsor.
I think for me, the most powerful thing is don't speak like an HR person, don't speak like a training person, don't be the L&D guy. Come as a business person, understand what they're trying to do, understand what the problems are from their point of view, and talk about how you can help fix those. I think then people will listen and think, okay, you're not just coming along with some new shiny thing that you want me to be excited about. You're putting yourself in my shoes about what will help me. I think that, for me, is one of the biggest things.
Yeah, I would really agree with that. And I think ways to do that are things like completely immersing yourself in their business, you know, not as the learning person, but showing a genuine interest in their challenges and their business. And then when you're starting to talk about learning interventions, talking about what that impact's going to be from the result of you working alongside them. And then for anything like face-to-face or virtual, them being the face of it, not the learning team, I think is another, you know, key way for it to have impact.
And also play the long game. Number of CPOs I see coming in who've figured out from the talent plan who the next chief exec's going to be and have found a project and attached themselves to that person. So then when that person becomes chief exec, they're the natural successor into the CPO role. So if you're in a big corporate, figure out from the talent plan who's going to get the next big role and attach yourself to them. Any more questions? Oh, another one. This might be the last one.
Hello. A question about the elephant in the room, disruption. Okay, 2026 has to bear within it new forms of disruption. So I need one story from someone of you, based on your experience, one form of disruption or a trend of disruption. How did you cope with it? How did you... I love your expression. What was the context? Just one story, you know, just to make us feel what we're currently going through. Thank you.
You've got us thinking. My problem is coming up with a story where it's been solved, which is a stretch. But one thing I've identified, which I've been working on, let's say, is that often this disruption is more devastating because a company has more of a command and control style of operating. And so people see the disruption but don't act or make decisions because they feel it's not their job. And so something I've been exploring more is how you build up the sense of employee ownership in the company. So people feel both the sense of accountability for doing something when they spot a trend or a disruption, and also the sense that they can then do something about it because they feel the boss has got their back to try something. And so that's what I think could be a good answer for a lot of this. How do you build up accountability, performance, plus the positive side of engagement and everything else is kind of ownership. So that's what I'm working on.
So just quickly to add to that, I think we can't get away from disruption. It's everywhere. We know that, it's crazy. It's AI, there's restructures, the market's not great at the moment. And the way I tend to operate is within my own little world and with my team is I try and function like a startup, but in a very big firm, because I think if you don't and you're restricted by all those rules and regulations all the time, it doesn't allow you to think openly. So that's how I tend to look at it. I try and think as I'm working in a startup.
So without being too Machiavellian, see it as a personal opportunity. So dot-com bubble burst, I was working at Marconi, they made the whole training team redundant, I was last man standing, I got to run the thing. Financial crisis, HSBC, sending jobs over to India, rather than get made redundant, I jumped on a plane to India and set up a contact centre. And then COVID, everyone was looking for answers. So if you look like the other person in the room who knows what the answer is, they're going to look to you. So from a personal point of view, I would see all this disruption as a personal opportunity to kind of look to accelerate your career further. If you can figure out what's the thing they need in the room and what skills you need to be the most essential person in the room, there's your opportunity. Are we done? We've got time for one quick fire, I think. I said we could go 2 minutes over. So one more question if we've got it. There we go. No pressure, but it's the last question.
Hi panel, nice to see a couple of faces I know. So my question is around ROI and solving it. I'll just stop there and let you riff.
Could you say that again, Beth?
ROI, please. How are you solving it as leadership development teams? What are you measuring? How are you doing it? What's working, Gregor, please?
It's not the answer you want, but my approach is to try and build enough credibility and trust with the senior leaders that they stop asking for ROI as quick as possible. And if you have to prove it, just prove it once. Does this program do what we thought it would? Yes, right, stop proving it. Keep measuring again and again. And then if people keep saying, why should we be doing this leadership development? I kind of roll my eyes and say, what, we're going to not train our leaders? Geez, and kind of just try and move on quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I try not to use the word ROI. It kind of brings me out in hives. So I try and use the word impact, which I think I've mentioned a couple of times. So I think, say from leadership development, what we're trying to do a lot of is the impact and the conversations are told through stories from the leader. That really works for our firm, might not work for all organizations. So we're doing quite a lot of work with those individuals measuring themselves at frequent points on their journey through the leadership development that we're doing and how we're supporting them, and then supporting them in taking that further and having those conversations with people in the business so that they're seeing that impact. And when they tell that story, they're sharing that wider, and then we're using those sound bites. So it's actually quite a lot more qualitative than perhaps what I've done in previous organizations, but it's definitely meaning that the most senior stakeholders and leaders are seeing that impact, like they're visibly seeing it. And I think that's a good way to kind of move away from ROI through telling a story.
And I think just quickly, I think what ROI or impact isn't, and it isn't attendance. That's one of the things that, it really does get on my nerves. I think just seeing how many people have booked on a course or anything just doesn't mean anything, because we all know people can be passively on a course, not really taking anything in. So we really need to show, okay, how are we actually moving the needle on our programs?
Right, we're at time. Can I ask you to put your hands together, please, and just thank our panel for the time they've given up today. And thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you found it useful. We're going to stick around for 5 minutes if you want to come and grab other questions. Cheers.